Now let's welcome Dr. David Sir, Professor David Wood, Chair London Futuristic, and his topic is today, as the fourth industrial revolution accelerates, what skills will entrepreneurs and researchers need? Dear friends, this reminds me, entrepreneur, a word from Sanskrit called as Antaprerna, that is within. Entrepreneur is within that we need to go on. And it is rightly said in Marathi also, Udyojak. So we have to continuously get engaged. And Vyavsayi, we need to have a connect. All these three aspects are there with Dr. David Wood, sir. He is basically associated with the smartphone industry. He has co-founded Symbian in 1998.
Wow.
He is a new full-time futuristic speaker, analyst and commentator, writer. His focus is on potential radical transformations in society and humanity. Transformations enabled by accelerating technological disruption mediated by social and political reaction. His background is designing, architecting, implementing, supporting, and using smartphone devices. This includes 10 years with PDA manufacturer PLC, 10 more with smartphone operating system specialist in Symbian Limited, 3 years as CTO for Accenture Mobility. He is the author and lead editor of 9 books. The previous book includes The Abolition of Aging and Transcending Politics and Sustainable Superabundance. Delta Wisdom is an independent futurist consultancy and publisher founded by him. Sir, thank you very much. We are blessed today. And once again, good afternoon, India, and good morning to London.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Over to you, sir.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I can't see my face on the screen yet. Do I need to do something else to connect?
We can see your screen.
You can see
your face.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So I'm really... I appreciate the chance to be part of this remarkable meeting. What I'm going to do is to share my slides now. Let's see if you can see my slides. Let me know if I freeze. There's a slight chance that my internet connection will slow down and then it will start again. If that happens, I'll go back. My name's David Wood. As you heard, I'm chair of an organization called London Futurist, which has for the last 12 years held nearly 250 public meetings looking at radical scenarios for the future. And what I'm going to be sharing with you in the next 25 minutes or so is some of the most important findings from these nearly 250 meetings about the forthcoming technological changes. You can find me fairly easily online if anybody wants to follow up with me afterwards. On Twitter, I am DW2. By the way, that's the most mathematics there's going to be in this presentation, although I did have my first degree in mathematics. There will be some curves later on. In case you're wondering, this picture is not of me. This is a kind of symbolization of the forthcoming rapid acceleration of artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution. And in my talk, I'll be trying to share recommendations for the skills that people will need in that coming tumultuous change. Looking ahead 25 years to 2035, let's start by briefly reminding ourselves what remarkable changes there have been in the worlds of technology in the last 15 years. 15 years ago, 2005, none of these items that I'm now listing existed, or if they existed, they barely existed and had little influence on people's lives. How things have changed in these 15 years. But what's coming next? Some people say innovation will stabilize. Yes, there will be some degree of change, but don't worry, the skills that students are learning today will be broadly useful throughout the next 15 years. Other people say that innovation's actually going to dry up, that most of the easy things have already been done, and we are faced with a technology drought, or some people call it a technology winter. I disagree. I think that innovation will actually accelerate, and that's what I'm going to try to convince you of in my presentation today. And I'll describe what the fourth industrial revolution is and what it means for all of us. This rather simple picture shows in rough outline the four phases of the great industrial revolution. It arises out of societies that appreciate and practice the scientific method and which are open to the extent of allowing criticism of authorities and open in the sense of allowing entrepreneurs to gather together and use technology solutions for innovative business ideas. We've gone through four waves: steam, mechanization, and then trains, which changed the world, then electricity, synthetic chemicals, mass production, which changed the world even more, then computers, electronics, cellular communications, starting from around 1959, the first silicon integrated circuit with just one transistor on it. And we're looking ahead now to what I'm going to call NBIC convergence. Before I explain that, let me point out there is an acceleration of timescales here. If we look at the delays between the starts of successive waves, they're getting smaller all the time by about a factor of 2/3. It's driven by acceleration caused by positive feedback cycles, which I will try to explain. NBIC stands for 4 quadrants of a single set of remarkable changes. I stands for infotech, which is not just computing with bits, not just storing bits, not just transmitting bits. These are all third industrial revolution technologies. But infotech here means analyzing big data with machine learning to come up with new insight that humans themselves could not obtain. It's not just software, it is software written by software. N stands for nanotech, which is more precise control over matter at the atomic scale. And the previous speaker, Dr. Mecha, gave some insight into one or two of the remarkable things that are happening there. We could also talk about the forthcoming nanobots, nanosensors, quantum computing, and improvements in 3D and 4D printing. B stands for, can you guess it? Biotech. It's the manipulation not just of our silicon, but of our genetics, our epigenetics, our biome, as we can increasingly read and understand our biological information and potentially improve upon the designs we have inherited from evolution. And C stands for cognotech. It's the understanding and manipulation of our neurons in our brain. And of the 4, that's the one that's least developed so far, but may have the most profound impact of all. The top of this picture is basically hardware. The bottom is basically software. The left is basically physics. The right is basically biology. But what's most important is the set of interactions between the quadrants. We could spend a long time pointing out convergences. I'll pick on one now and come back to another later. Imagine that nanotech gives us greater nanosensors, which will allow us to study what's going on inside the human brain without cutting the brain open. It's easier for us now to understand what might be happening in the brain when people are intuitive, when they are being creative, when they are meditating, and so forth. And the more we understand the human brain, the more we can copy some of the ideas into artificial intelligence. And then with these skills, we can improve healthcare in leaps and bounds, and so on it goes. That's one reason why there's an acceleration. But I also mentioned positive feedback cycles. Let's have some examples now. The first industrial revolution involved steam powered machinery. Machinery needs to be built with tools, but with machines, you can build better tools. And with better tools, you can build better machines, and so on. The third industrial revolution involved computers, and at first, they were difficult to build and design and manufacture. But it's possible to use computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacture to improve the design and manufacture of anything, including computers. So one generation of computers enables better generations of computers to be built, which enables yet better subsequent generations. And it's the same with software. Software is built by humans who use software tools to help them, like debuggers and compilers. And there's a positive virtual feedback there too. And this takes us finally to the future. Artificial intelligence is built in part by clever humans who generally earn large salaries today, but they are helped by AI tools of various sorts that I'll explain shortly. So one generation of AI can improve the next generation of AI tools, which leads to yet more progress in AI. I've mentioned AI, artificial intelligence. It's time to discuss briefly two types of artificial intelligence. The one type is rules, a set of rules programmed by humans. The other type is to spot patterns via machine learning. And we can compare them by briefly considering one very real problem with big commercial implications. Can software read handwritten digits and reliably know what each squiggle of ink represents? And there are two approaches you might imagine. The set of rules. You could teach computers reasonably easily to spot lines in pictures, to spot curves or arcs, to spot complete loops, and to spot where different parts of the picture join together or almost join together. And you could give it a rule. If you see a complete loop or something like a complete loop and nothing else, you're probably seeing the digit 0. But there are many complications here. If you try and write down a complete set of rules, it gets very complicated with exceptions and exceptions to the exceptions. It can be done, but for a long time, computer scientists wondered, couldn't we copy what's happening inside the human brain? The human brain learns to spot patterns without going through such complicated rules learning. It's like a young child learning to speak a language. The young child doesn't sit down at an early age with a complete book of grammar. He or she watches his or her family and learns in that way. So instead of classical AI, the idea is that software could learn by training. It could make an initial guess and test that guess and get feedback from training data, or in this simple example, from family members. And it goes around there again and again and again. That is the simple description of machine learning, whereas the left creates what could be called artificial rationality. The right has been described as creating artificial intuition. So two approaches to artificial intelligence, both have been around for many decades. It turns out that the pattern recognition did not make much progress, despite some early hype in the 1950s and 1960s. There was little progress in this field. There was success with reading digits in 1980s, but even that didn't go very far. It turns out, we didn't know it earlier, it turns out that for this to work, you need lots and lots of computing power. And what's happened since the 1990s, not just have CPUs, central processing units, got better, we have developed new kinds of chips like GPUs, which are graphics processing units that are very good at doing lots of calculations at the same time in parallel. They were developed for teenagers and for grown-up teenagers to play graphics games, but it turns out they're very good at doing pattern recognition for deep learning. After that, we've got tensor processing units, and later we might even have quantum processing units. That was needed. We also needed lots and lots of labeled data. Well, by about 2012, there were lots of big data which had been gathered. And gradually, computer scientists found out how to train their systems using this large big data. There was also needed to be some improvements in the design of the method, which I don't have time to explain, modifications to things called backpropagation. But from 2012, very successful results were noted. And since then, the field has exploded. The number of computations to train individual models has doubled every 3.5 months since 2012. And if you're aware of Moore's law, which describes the speed of doubling of power of semiconductors, that doubles every 18 months. So there's something much faster happening in this field. Let me show you some examples of what computers in 2012 were able to do that people previously thought was impossible. They were trained on looking at lots of images along with captions. That means descriptions of the image. And then they were shown different pictures, not similar to the ones they'd seen before. And they were able to come up with captions like a group of young people playing a game of Frisbee. And I understand that when the software engineers saw this answer, they almost fell off their chairs with shock at how good a description this was. Old-fashioned methods with rules and exceptions to rules had never managed to give such good descriptions. Look at this picture. Watch here. The computer said a person riding a motorcycle on a dirt road. Look at this picture. What's happening here? The computer said a herd of elephants walking across a dry grass field. Should you be impressed by this? Well, you should probably be skeptical. You should want to know if these are just very good examples from a lot of other mistaken examples. And it's true, the software does get things wrong, sometimes in very humorous ways. What should impress you, however, is the statistical analysis that used to take place every year in a competition called LSVRC, Large Scale Visual Recognition Challenge. Software teams from different universities or companies around the world gathered each year for a competition, a bit like the Olympics, and their visual recognition software was shown thousands of new pictures, and in each case they had to pick from 5 possible captions. And the question was, how reliable were they? And you can see the results here. They've improved significantly in 2010 when all the teams were using classical AI. The error rates were still more than 1 in 4. In 2012, one team applied the methods of deep learning, and neural networks had a big speed up in performance. And from then on, every team used variants of that. And you can see that in later years, the performance was superhuman because the errors was less than 1 in 40, whereas humans do make mistakes in captioning pictures from time to time, confusing, for example, different animals or different breeds of dogs. And this is not just a competition for teams. This technology has subsequently revolutionized field after field of human life. Healthcare, lawyers, financial trading, and more, as we'll discuss. Let's put this on a single picture now. This is the growth in the capability of artificial intelligence. This is the growth and capability of that first wave, classical AI, expert systems with large number of rules, each painstakingly listed by human programmers. This is the new wave, the wave of neural networks and deep learning, which has been around for a long time. And initially, as I said, there was lots of disappointments. The disappointments led many gurus of artificial intelligence, such as Marvin Minsky and Seymour Papert, very brilliant people, to write even a book in 1969 called Perceptrons, which argued that deep learning could never achieve much. It was fundamentally limited and incapable. Thankfully, not everybody believed these experts. Thankfully, research continued. And as I mentioned, in 2012, there was this significant crossover point due to the accumulation of big data and graphics processing units, which have led more and more people to say, oh my goodness. And we now look back at classical AI, even though it's capable, as good old-fashioned AI, and we're in a new world. But what I really want to talk to you about is a new wave of artificial intelligence, a wave that might do to today's deep learning what deep learning did to good old-fashioned AI. And that might make us even cry out, oh my freaking goodness, at the speed and extent of that breakthrough. Of course, many people who are in the current wave of computing deny this, but I think that denial is misplaced, as was the earlier denial in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and early 2000s by AI experts at that time of the potential of deep learning. I think we'll look back at deep learning in just a few years' time and think of it as good old-fashioned deep learning. So briefly, I'm going to answer 4 questions. Why I think a new breakthrough is likely, what this new breakthrough might include, when it might happen, and then there's the so what question, the very important so what question. What does this imply for our skills? Why? Well, briefly, it comes down to money, money, money. Every field of industry stands to be transformed by better AI, whether it's financial trading algorithms, the very large gaming industry, which benefits from having virtual characters with good AI, customer support agents that want to go beyond the limitations of today's rather unintelligent AI chatbots, improved interaction design, faster healthcare research and development, new creative directions in art and music, improvements in engineering design, which is already happening, improvements in new theories of science. It hasn't happened yet, but I don't think it'll be long. So just as 10 years ago, the phrase of interest was software is eating the world, meaning that whatever industry you were in, you were likely to be outcompeted unless you were expert in software. The new phrase is going to be software written by AI is eating the world, using these 4th industrial revolution techniques. It's not just the good guys, the business people who are chasing against each other in a great competition and therefore investing money to improve AI. There are some bad guys in here too. The creators of malware are using AI systems to try and earn more money through their criminal activities. Anti-malware companies are using AI too, and the malware companies are using better AI. There is a vicious positive feedback cycle there, an arms race, if you like. And by the way, there's an arms race with real arms, with autonomous weaponry that could evade defensive missiles, and then improvements in the AI running the defensive missiles so that they catch the incoming missiles after all. Feedback, feedback, feedback. It's not just commercial competition, there is geopolitical competition. This thinker here, you may recognize him as Vladimir Putin, was asked about artificial intelligence in a conference. He gave a very good answer. He's a smart, well-informed person. Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for his own country, Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. And he then went on to say, whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. He didn't say it, but if you imagine what today's fake news and armies of troll bots can do, imagine what could be accomplished by even smarter such systems. This should be a Sputnik moment. It should be a call to arms for the rest of the world to improve their AI too, because despite Vladimir Putin's many fine qualities, I don't actually want him to be the ruler of the world. Another Sputnik moment happened in 2016 regarding this ancient game. Now, I know in India, there is a very ancient tradition of chess. In the Far East, China, Korea, and Japan, there is this game Go. which is thought and actually is deeper in terms of its complex possibilities than chess. It's very hard to know who is winning in a particular position. That's why the best humans in this competition thought they would outperform software for a long time to come. And they said, one of them said to me in December 2013, that software engineers are still 20 years away from having AI software that could beat humans at Go. What you see on this picture is the Korean best Go player, who was the world champion many times. He thought just a few months before a competition in 2016, he would win that competition 5-0 or perhaps 4-1. But as you may know, the result was the other way around. All of Korea was shocked. It was a Sputnik moment for them. It was a Sputnik moment also for China, which was watching carefully. They didn't believe it straight away. They had a young Go player that they thought was even better than the Korean Lee Sedol, but he also was beaten comprehensively in a match shortly afterwards. That was alarming to the Chinese, who were concerned that their ancient game, thought to be the pinnacle of creativity and intuition, was now being won by Western software actually largely developed in London. So China publicly said they will become the leading AI power by 2030. What you can see here is the bookshelves of Xi Jinping on his New Year's Day address, and people have studied this and they have found books on AI and futurism sprinkled in there, along with books by Mao and Lenin and Hemingway and Dickens and Homer. They are taking this seriously. So why will there be new waves of AI? Because of commercial pressures and incentives, because of growing global political competition, serviced by huge numbers of people who are learning more about AI than ever before, using online information, which is easy to find, easy to research, and using today's AI and deep learning to help them create the next generation of AI and deep learning. A couple of examples, as I promised earlier. The Google Brain team in Google, led by Jeff Dean, has created something called AutoML, auto machine learning, which is one large piece of machine learning that is able to build smaller deep learning systems that are more powerful and more efficient than the best systems that the human researchers themselves can design. People should pay attention. And then there is the growth of better chip design. Better chip design, such as TPUs that I mentioned, allows better AI, but the feedback goes the other way. With better AI, there can be better chip design. And another group in Google is now using AI to design chips that will accelerate AI. As they say, chip layout involves very complicated 3D Tetris. So plenty of reasons why there will be improvements. I don't have time to explain in detail what these new waves may consist, but we can point to 8 possible areas of breakthrough. Biologically inspired AI refers to the fact that many leading AI companies have more neuroscience PhD researchers than you would expect. They don't just have computing science researchers. They're trying to copy more from the brain. Artificial emotional intelligence is a growing field. AI that understands causation rather than just patterns, as explained in the very interesting book by researcher Judea Pearl, The Book of Why. Generative adversarial networks have done remarkable things in the last few years in the work of creativity. Decentralized AI, such as in the company that I help to advise, SingularityNet. You heard earlier from Dr. Manu Heron about the possible breakthroughs by studying machines with sentience. And the most interesting, in my view, is improvements in transfer learning, in which software that is trained on one task can very quickly learn other tasks too. When will these breakthroughs happen? Nobody knows for sure, because it depends on research breakthroughs that we can't fully understand in advance. We don't know whether a single breakthrough will yield lots of results or whether we'll need many breakthroughs. But I do urge everybody to prepare to be surprised because of the big pressures in this field. I will say I consider there's a 10% chance of major changes as early as 2025 and a 50% chance of artificial general intelligence by 2050 because of the factors I have briefly explained. Be skeptical when people are dogmatically skeptical. Yes, they will find some AI professors saying this is impossible. I point again to their predecessors who also denied there could be breakthroughs in deep learning. Finally then, so what? What are the skills we need? I've just time to touch on 4 skills. We do need to expect change. We need to expect that the boundary between what humans can do and what AIs can do, it's going to keep moving fast. So do not think that you can find one field of skills that AI will never catch up. The AI will catch you up sooner rather than later. Prepare not just for small change, prepare for the kind of exponential change that has happened in the past, in which a slow, disappointing period of change is overtaken by a dramatic disruption. And to anticipate this, we need to become better at thinking about future scenarios. Scenarios involve combinations of different trends. We need to become better, therefore, at collaborating, because we can't figure this out by ourselves. More than ever before, we need to be skilled at learning which experts we can trust and which experts we should stop trusting. The other skill, very important, is agility. Agility isn't just a buzzword, it is a real set of skills. Comes from the world of software. It can be applied more widely. It breaks down big, difficult projects into smaller groups. It helps people to learn how to experiment, to learn how to fail productively, to fail fast, and to fail forwards. This requires courage. It requires emotional intelligence. It requires being able to cope with future shock without becoming paralyzed. And that's why I say possibly the most important skill is emotional intelligence. It was always important. It's even more important in the future. Without emotional intelligence, we won't be able to be agile and we won't be able to collaborate. And the biggest form of collaboration we'll need, and this would take us too far afield, is improvements in how we do politics, because this is going to lead to many people not having jobs. We will need something like a universal basic income and greater resilience in society. So I'll finish there. I'll just point to 3 books that I have written that go into these arguments, which I have rushed today in more detail. There's The Abolition of Aging that looks at how AI could help to reverse and aging and make aging something outdated and quaint. Sustainable Superabundance looks at how AI can help improve all areas of life, not just our health and longevity. And the most recent book has a practical roadmap for how we can get to abundance, flourishing, and transcendence for everybody by 2035. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you have found at least some of that thought-provoking.
Thank you very much, Professor David.